the decision by the Alliance for Change and the APNU to enter into a coalition to contest the May 11 general and regional elections. The PPP is not surprised by this move on the part of the two opposition parties, which have already been working in tandem to frustrate and destabilize the developmental agenda of the PPPC administration ever since the 2011 elections, which gave a one-seat majority to the opposition in Parliament. What the PPP found most nauseating is the depth to which both parties, in particular the AFC, have sunk in their attempt to seek political power. This insatiable appetite for power has resulted in the AFC being forced to swallow their pride, having stated categorically that it would never ever enter into an alliance with the APNU in the first place, and afterwards to cede the presidential slot to the APNU, despite assurances to its membership and the wider public that it will only enter into a coalition unless it gets the presidential candidate. It is now crystal clear that the AFC is in no position whatsoever to, as it were, call the shots, and is now forced once again to eat the proverbial humble pie. The AFC is now pushed into the political backwater in the new alliance configuration. The so-called Commingsburg Accord will be remembered with shame down the corridors of time as the day of betrayal of principles on the part of the AFC, which through its chairman, Ramjatan, has vowed never to join forces with the APNU in an electoral alliance. The decision to put up a former PPP member as the prime ministerial candidate is at best cosmetic, aimed at creating a facade of some measure of political leverage, when in fact the AFC will have no alternative but to acquiesce to the diktat of the much powerful PNC partner. The fact that the AFC ended up having to give up on its demand to lead the pro-democracy alliance and for a former PPP member to be the presidential candidate is indicative of the lack of clout by both of these two former PPP members within their party and in the structure of the alliance itself. It is to be recalled that this former PPP member was proposed as Speaker of the National Assembly following the November elections, which gave the combined opposition a one-seat majority, but he failed to get the support of the APNU. Today, this same individual is touted as the prime ministerial candidate in the new opposition outfit, a post which he opportunistically accepted with the full knowledge that he is a mere appendage to a bigger game plan hatched by the Granger-led PNC to remove the PPPC from office. Fresh in the memory of the Guyanese people is the experience of the 1964 period when the United Force entered into a coalition government with the PNC to unseat the PPP government, only to be unceremoniously kicked out by the PNC a mere 3 years later into the life of the coalition government. It took 28 years before the country saw another free and fair elections, but not before a once prosperous country was reduced to one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. The PPP calls on all Guyanese to learn from the lessons of history and to not allow themselves to be duped by those who are prepared to sacrifice the good of this nation to satisfy their lust for power. The party urges one and all to reject these modern-day Judases who will have no difficulty whatsoever in selling their heart and soul for a few pieces of silver in the quest to enter the political kingdom. There's only one party that could deliver this beautiful nation out of poverty and want, based on a proven track record, progress, and good governance. That party is the People's Progressive Party, which come May 11th, under the leadership of Ramatar, will continue to elevate this country to higher levels of progress and prosperity. The next statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party calls on all eligible Guyanese who have not registered as yet or need to conduct registration transactions during the current claims and objections period to ensure they do so urgently, since there's still a small opening available for this to be done. The PPP is aware that many persons living in new housing schemes have not taken transfers to the current place of residence. The opportunity is now, and this will enable the voter to vote at the closest possible available polling station in the place of residence. Further, the party calls on the Guyana Elections Commission to increase its public awareness campaign, and in this regard, to ensure that mobile teams are dispatched into critical areas at the convenience of residents. The PPP has received many complaints that lists are not available in some areas or are not conspicuously placed for residents to check and verify their particulars. For example, in Region 3, residents of Anna Katrina and Cornelia Ida have been encountering many difficulties to verify their particulars on the list. GCOM must also ensure that proper and adequate polling places are identified and made known to voters at an early stage so as to avoid last-minute changes, as was the case in the 2011 elections. This created much confusion and caused many voters to relinquish their democratic right in frustration. The PPP, time and again, has echoed its concerns on the role of information clerks. The 2011 elections was marred with inconsistencies and confusion created by GCOM staffers. Many of them either lacked basic understanding of the voting system or were poorly trained with no dry run or simulation done. Also, deliberate acts of frustration to voters in certain areas cannot be written off. The party calls on GCOM to ensure that if used in 2015, these information clerks must be carefully selected, trained, and properly placed, since they are the first persons whom voters encounter and act as the face of GCOM on polling day. Again, the party would like to reiterate its call for public vetting of polling day staff. On numerous occasions, the issue of transparency in the recruitment process has been raised by the party, and past experiences, particularly occurrences in 2011 elections in Georgetown, have made us even more vigilant in the selection of polling day staff. Further to this, training and simulations are very critical to the entire electoral process, particularly on polling day. Guyanese must demand that proper systems and mechanisms are implemented by GCOM to ensure that a clean and transparent OLE is prepared. Voters' education is intensified, a smooth and incident-free process at polling places, and the timely declaration of results. These are the necessary ingredients for a free and fair elections on May 11, 2015. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. There you have the two statements. Now we'll take questions.
Again, also, thank you, Miss. Good morning. Sir, Mr. Roby, you spoke about the much powerful PNCRs, and you said before that the PNCR/APN, as you put it, is the more senior party of the two, meaning AFC and APNU, and had the most seats in the National Assembly. So So didn't you, in this regard, expect a compromise, or was that talk just steered at pushing the two parties away from each other while they were in talks for pro democracy alliance?
I can only speculate on that. I don't think there's any concrete evidence to show what was happening one way or the other. So if that is what they are comfortable with and that is what they, came up with, well, at the end of the day, we could say that the jury is out. And on May 11th, we will obviously see, the consequences of that alliance.
Okay, sir, you said that you're not surprised about the alliance, but you're surprised that the AFC, quote unquote, sunk to these levels. When you say sink, did you hold the AFC at higher standards at some point?
Well, sunk is a relative term. It doesn't mean that you've been at a high standard. You could be sinking or still sinking.
Okay, so you're saying that it's for the sunk?
I maintain what I said in the document. I will elaborate further on that.
Sir, you said the placing of a former PPP member as prime ministerial candidate is a facade. In 2006-11, there was a former PNC candidate, Raphael Trotman, who was a presidential candidate. Did you see that as a facade back then?
I can't recall how we viewed it back then, but in retrospect, Raphael Trotman came from the PNC.
Yes.
So if he was the AFC presidential candidate at the time, I don't see that much as a facade. But this one is clearly one, for obvious reasons.
So by extension, Rupert Roopnaraine, who was a WPA member of parliament, and later, prime minister candidate, that's before the APNU. Was that a facade, you said?
Well, I don't think we could rationalize, because I think this is what I'm being asked to do, to rationalize the decision by those parties to arrive at certain presidents or certain candidates, notwithstanding the background from whence they came. I think in the political world, you can't rationalize everything politically. But I would say in this particular case, we're not saying so because of where the person came from, but we're saying so precisely because of what they're aiming to accomplish. That's where we find the facade more relevant.
And one last question, sir. Wouldn't this alliance expose the depth of ethnic or racial grouping in Guyana? For example, you know and I know that there were people who were supporting the AFC, having become disillusioned with the PPP, and we spoke about that here instead of going back home. And there were still some who opted to stay. Now that this alliance is there, given that the perceived conception of APNU, would these people run back home in greater numbers largely because of racial tendencies?
I think the AFC have signed their death warrant.
Explain.
Meaning, they are quite likely to be the biggest losers in an election that's going to be hotly contested in a two-way fight. So, we are just chomping at the bits to go, because this is creating for us, in other words, not the alliance, but the election is creating a tremendous amount of energy. And the track record of these opposition parties in the parliament, I want you to listen to this very carefully, because I don't want what I'm saying to be misunderstood. It's not the alliance is energizing our people. What is energizing our people is the need to get over the experiences we had in the 10th Parliament, where all of our developmental projects were being blocked, and where the one-seat majority or the uncontrollable horse was let loose on the people of Guyana. So our supporters and our members do not want a return to that situation. And that is what is energizing them. They are now more excited and energetic than before because now they see themselves being challenged, not by this coalition, but by the experiences that they've seen, and they need not to return to that, but to go beyond that, which means a bigger majority in the parliament and the retention of the executive office.
But this, no, but I really want to get back to this point about AFC being the biggest loser.
Mhm.
Why? Is it because supporters from the past are going to go back home, as you said?
Well, they've already started doing that.
I know they've been saying that.
They've already started doing that, so this might give impetus
Ah,
to the process. Might very well do so.
Kurt Campbell, quick follow-up, Minister.
And, Adam,
thank you.
electoral politics in our country has had, a pattern. So let us, take for example the WPA. You recall that the WPA in the past, they were running on this unity issue, that we must move away from racial politics. They're going to change the racial dynamics, and they themselves were calling for this type of government, which this coalition now calling for. I don't think the people were convinced. Experience has shown that instead of the people, warming to that kind of notion, they instead backed away from it and continued with certain voting patterns. Let's wait and see what will happen here. I'm not predicting that will happen, but voters are voters. They're quite intelligent and smart people. I don't think we should underestimate the intelligence not to see through the maneuvering that are taking place. So, who don't end up dead politically will come out badly wounded.
Minister Roy Kurt Campbell, how would you respond
all kind of propositions, scenarios, and so forth, which is quite, normal. But at the end of the day, they still have to win the elections before they can even, before they can put in place any of those theoretical postulations that they've come up with.
Minister Roy Hannah Duncan, Age Tribune 19 News. Just a quick question. You urge one and all to reject what you term these modern day Judases. All right? And you would like basically the populace to rally around the PPPC. You also went on to say that this is a party that can take persons out of poverty and so on. I'm now left to wonder, over 20 years in government, were you doing that? I mean, why do we need to vote for you, the party, to do that?
Well, wonders never cease. So when you say you're left to wonder, I was wondering whether it was wonder or wonder. But I give you the benefit of the doubt that you were wondering. But that's wonderful to wonder sometimes. The point I want to make is this, that firstly, what seems to be the crux of the alliance or the coalition is a deep-seated hatred for the PPP. That is the single most important factor that brought these people together. Deep-seated hatred for the PPP, and they keep saying it over and over again, that they wish is to see the back of the PPP. No, just a minute, Tracy Ronaldo. Did somebody say Tracy Ronaldo? Oh.
We look alike, it's okay.
So, it seems more a marriage of convenience. And by the way, a Valentine love affair, eventually was consummated. The love affair that lasted for 3 years in Parliament, of courting, and we would say in our street language, sewering, finally managed to consummate itself on Valentine's Day. What an appropriate day for such a marriage to be consummated. I think many lovers would be happy if their courtship was consummated on Valentine's Day. So that's one. The second thing is that, or the third thing is that the question of the program. What is the program? What is the basic principles on which this coalition stands? I have read the comments of a number of independent observers, and it is clear to many that they are skeptical and they have doubts about the coalition precisely because they have not seen the basic principles, tenets, pillars on which this coalition has been consummated. So, the deep-seated hatred for the PPP, the coming together because of mutual self-interest, these are apparently the primordial factors that brought these individuals together rather than a program which people can rally around. And I can assure you, it is the PPP's program, when it is published, that will create that rallying point for the Guyanese electorate. Trust me on that one.
No, Mr. Robinson, I just wanted to know, how has the coalition actually affected the PPP's campaign strategy? You've yet to have a prime ministerial candidate. I know that you haven't released your campaign strategy as yet, but has this alliance thrown a hiccup in what you were going with as opposed to now what you have to go with?
No, because you see, again I come back to the way we analyze social and political phenomena in the PPP. We have not departed from the scientific way of analyzing social and political developments in our country. And we use certain analytical tools to do so. We use certain scientific political tools to do that. I mean, for example, the political science in which many of us have been trained, the fact that we have won an elections over and over again, it meant that we are analytical people. We can analyze social phenomena. We can interpret these developments. I don't think elections are won by dunderheads. Elections are won by people who could think things through.
But then you would have.
No, just a minute, I'm coming to that now. It means that since we were observing over the years the increasing relationship and cooperation between the AFC and the APNU in the parliament, how they engaged in concubinage over the years in parliament and even outside of parliament on key issues, it would be remiss of us as political scientists if we did not take that kind of experience into consideration when formulating our election strategy.
But if you spend time analyzing that, you would have had to spend some time analyzing that the PDP has seen a reduction in votes for that party consistently within the last couple of elections, so.
All these factors are brought into the analytical framework which we discuss, which we analyze, and come up with scenarios that put us in the best position we can put ourselves in to advance our electoral fortunes. I made the point several times, and the PVP has said so from time to time, that we did make certain errors in the 2011 elections. Had we not made those errors, I think our political fortunes would have been different. Since that time, we have worked to correct those mistakes. We have worked as energetically as we can to correct those mistakes. What is the point in recognizing at least we had the testicular perspicacity
I love that word.
to recognize that we made mistakes. We were man enough to recognize that we made mistakes. Now, what is the point in recognizing that you are man enough to make mistakes and not work to correct them? So that is what we have been doing. We've been working as energetically, as creatively as we can to overcome those difficulties. I personally believe we have come a far way since then. We have come a far way since then.
So how concerned is the party going into this election, which is less than 100 days away? How concerned is the party now that you're putting a lot on the line, hoping that you corrected a lot of mistakes, that you're kind of just speaking in circles about political science and analyzing, but you're not actually saying anything definitive?
No,
that you've actually
please,
done?
please. I'm not probably speaking the way a journalist would like me to speak. You probably would like me to, you'd like me to, you know, no. You would like me to speak to satisfy your journalistic endeavors, but politicians don't do that.
Sir, is anything your correction had anything to do with reaching out to the U.S. for campaign strategies?
I didn't get that one.
Did your strategy
Uh-huh.
have anything to do with reaching out to the U.S.?
You know to who?
The United States.
Uh-huh. You mean as a government?
Me and this government, you recruit the campaign manager
No.
as you drop on Ross.
No, but
The campaign
you're being kind
manager,
of, you're not being very,
All right. Is it part of your strategy
uh-huh.
to reach out to where you did for a new campaign manager? Is this new campaign thing a strategy at the expense of Orny Ross, who's been with you from 1990?
No, listen to me. Maybe because we haven't made ourselves clear. But Orny Ross was never a campaign manager for this party.
All right.
And we don't have a campaign manager. As I said it last week. The PVP doesn't have a history of, identifying anyone as a campaign manager. If someone identifies themselves as a campaign manager, then unfortunately, that is not the case. But the party has not now and in the past identified anyone as a campaign manager. This term campaign manager appears to be a term that is being bandied around the place, that if you ain't got a campaign manager, you can't make it. That is not relative to how we operate. So there's no one individual out there that is directing the show. We direct our show collectively. We have our structures in place. We have our own internal mechanism in place. And based on that, that's how we approach all elections.
The US team, what is it then?
The what?
The US team that you have incorporated.
What? We don't have any U.S. team. Which U.S. team you're talking about?
Joshua Morrow,
There's a team?
the man.
Well, let's be clear what we're talking about here. That's what I'm trying to get
What
clear.
is Mr.
Adam,
What's
you,
Mr. Morrow doing?
who you representing?
I knew, sir.
And who is he representing?
Prime Minister.
I'm listening to him.
Okay, sir.
He is asking me about a U.S. team.
All right.
If you want to help him, that's a different matter. Whether he can accept your help is another
I
matter.
haven't accepted, Chief. Coalition.
Oh, really? iNews and Kaiser News now in coalition? Prime News and... Oh, okay. Anyway, what I'm saying, we don't have any campaign team. And I'm not talking about THEME, I'm talking about TEAM. We don't have any campaign team hired from the United States working with the PPP. Mention has been made about a name. I'm yet to fully establish who the gentleman is working with.
One final question, right?
Oh my, please do. Right.
Look, you got
follow-up
people
to
long,
Mr.
they want
Harris.
to ask questions.
No, I had my hand up a long time, Mr. Harris, and I was
But you had some people who never asked questions as yet.
But I don't know why they didn't push, sir. I have the pen.
No,
in
it
my
depends on
hand.
who I see.
But I have the pen.
You have a pen?
This is the thing you need to speak,
Go ahead.
and I have it. Thank you, sir. Now, a follow-up to Mr. Harris's question. You said
Mr.
that
who?
Harris. Adam Harris, Prime News,
Okay.
the macro Prime News.
Yes, that's good.
Sir, you said that everything in this campaign, because you don't have a campaign manager, would be a collective effort.
Yes.
Was it a collective effort to somehow mirror the U.S. president's speech?
The US what?
President, Mr. Barack Obama. The plagiarism, over the next 4 months, you have two choices to make.
I won't dignify that question with an answer. Because
Okay, and
you're looking at something that appeared on the TV put on by the AP and you're migrating that into my press conference. I think you should ask the AP and you that.
No problem, I'll ask them to. Sir,
Please do.
in Hannah's question, you answered one section about the Judases. However, I didn't get too clearly, probably my fault, your answer to the question why after 20 years UPP is still to deliver Guyana out of poverty.
Do you have any statistical evidence about where Guyana was in 1992 and where it is now? Bring that. Don't just ask. Bring me the evidence and ask the question based on evidence and statistics to show that in 1992 Guyana was at X point in relation to poverty, and in 2015 where we are in relation to poverty. I will not answer that question.
Sir, all right.
I
I
will
got the
not.
evidence, sir.
I will not answer that question because I recall the McIntyre report. The McIntyre report, which came out just on the eve of the 1993 elections, which statistically showed that Guyana, in terms of poverty, was worse than Haiti, was worse off than Haiti. And that is a former CARICOM Secretary General who led a team to this country to carry out certain studies. Now, the question therefore is relative, comparatively speaking, to what was said in 1992 in the McIntyre report to where we are now. That is the question that we need to answer. I am saying, without fear of contradiction, that Guyana has moved by leaps and bounds relative to where it was in 1992 based on what the McIntyre report said in respect of poverty in Guyana.
Hold on, I can challenge that, Chief.
Okay, well, bring
You
the, bring,
had- and I
publish,
agree,
publish
and
it,
your finance
publish,
minister
publish
got
the, Adam,
60%,
Adam. I don't think we can start it out here,
No,
but
60%
you
of
have
the country
access,
in abject poverty
you
in
ha-
2001, 60% in poverty, 30% in abject poverty.
Listen to me now, man.
85% of university graduates leave this
come on,
country, go
come on,
far.
come on. We ain't get no way with this discussion here. I would suggest you have access to a newspaper that boasts more circulation than this Tabak News. And I see they've been attacking this Tabak News recently. So like they're going on the Tabak News now. They're going after this Tabak News now. Publish a story in that and then we'll answer it.
Sir, would you be inclined to engage in public debates during the election season?
On what?
Well, based, whatever topics.
The
Chief
PPP has
Governor
always been
propose.
open to debates.
Public debates.
The PPP has always been open to debates.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Vanessa, you got the final
Last
question?
question. Jess, how do you respond to the criticisms from?
What's that?
How do you respond to the criticisms from Joy Jagan that the PPP is moving away from Dr. Ted Jagan's vision, and that for the first time since the party started, there's no Jagan on the list of candidates?
No, that's not the first time. Did we have him on the 2011 list? I don't recall that. Maybe, I don't recall it though. But where did he say? I haven't read what he said. Where did he say that?
In an interview.
I haven't seen the interview.
But that was the gist of what he said, that the party is moving away from the vision and the principles set out by Dr. Ted
Dr.
Jagan.
Joey Jagan is entitled to his view.
Mad, right?
Dr. Jagan, Joey Jagan Jr. is entitled to his view. I reject it completely. It is not true that we're moving away from what Dr. Jagan stood for. Not true.
All right, last final question.
Yeah, Minister, I just wanted to ask as GS of the party, do you have any knowledge of a petition from Region 4 and 5 demanding that the former president be the presidential candidate? Could you say we received a copy personally, and what is your reaction and reaction of the party?
Well, I've been asking questions. I have indeed seen a copy of the petition, and I've had discussions with the promoters of the petition to let them know, to get further clarification from them in respect to this petition. I've gotten that clarification. I've transmitted that clarification to the executive of our party, and it's with the executive right now.
Is that why former President Jaguar is here so often?
No. President Jaguar is a member of the party. He's a leader, one of the leaders of the party. Freedom House is his headquarters.
But you will be responding to the 6,000 supporters eventually.
Pardon?
You will be responding to the 6,000 supporters to say whether or not.
You'll probably be responding to them in the campaign.
Thank
Good.
you, ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen. Give me 2 hours. The secretary get the soft copy.
No. Let's come from the other place.